Okay, we are gonna continue with last time we did the introduction to Siman Reish Mem Ches. Today we're gonna continue with that. Apologize, I've been a little sick the last few days, and today a little. We're gonna continue. We're gonna try to go through the Mishnah Berurah. Siman, we're gonna be learning a lot of very important halachas about going on boats, ships, for Shabbos, on Shabbos, planes, trains. Is that gonna be permissible? Is it allowed to do other activities, optional surgeries? The person medically has to get induced. It's already dangerous. When to do the date, all sorts of these halachas we're going to be covering. So there's a lot coming up. Today we're just going to go through the Mishnah Berurah over here. We're going to start with the Shulchan Aruch. What will haflik b'sfina fil b'erev Shabbos? Permissible to go on a ship even on the eve of Shabbos. This talking about if you're going for a mitzvah purpose. And a person has to stipulate with him that the ship should stop. So we should stipulate and tell the captain who isn't Jewish to stop the ship on Shabbos, the boat. And if afterwards the ship doesn't stop, it's no problem. No problem at all. But for something optional, one is not allowed to go on a ship within 3 days of Shabbos. We learned about this already last time a little bit. Well, call them shlosh yamim. Shari. For 3 days will be permissible. Even if the ship is being pulled by animals. Whatever that means. Even if the height of the water is not 10 tvachim, 30, 40 inches, so it'd be a problem seemingly of a tchum, still fine. Even a place where the Jew needs to do malacha, do an act afterwards on Shabbos to help with the moving of the ship. And if it's a short distance, for example, like the Gemara said, short distance takes a day to walk between the two places. Permissible to go on the ship on the eve of Shabbos in the morning. Because it's possible that you could reach there before Shabbos. In a place where the custom is not to depart on the eve of Shabbos at all, even on a short way, no problem. In Mafligan, so in a place where the minhag is that they don't allow someone to depart on a ship Erev Shabbos, even on a small way, small distance, so then you're not allowed to go. Why is it prohibited to go on a ship if it's for a optional matter within 3 days of Shabbos? Hatam Yishu Moinik Shabbos. So the Shulchan Aruch is going like the Rif and the Rambam. Say that it's a Onik Shabbos. We're supposed to get pleasure from Shabbos. Shekol Shlosh Yamim Harishonim Yesh Lahem Saro Bilbul. With the first 3 days of the journey, there's going to be pain, and it could be a mix-up, commotion. In other words, the body won't be used to the sea and you're going to get seasick. It specifically applies that a guy is going on a waters that are salty waters. But if it's fresh water, there's no problem because it's not as shaky and you're not going to get seasick. That's why it's permissible to go on that ship even on Erev Shabbos. We see a difference between salt water versus fresh water. This is referring to that if we don't know the depth is 10 tvachim or not, but if we know that from the floor of the ship to the ocean, to the floor of the body of water that you're in, or if the river is less than 10 tvachim, then it's going to be prohibited. There's a problem of tchum, going outside the border of Shabbos.
I must say we're not worried about that, or that was just in terms of salt water.
Which Rama? And Sefalef?
No, yeah, in Sefalef. Yeah, didn't you say we're not worried about that?
Where's this?
I feel in Gavoa Mayim Asar Tvachim.
That was talking about before 3 days.
It's only in that scenario.
That's before 3 days. Now we're within 3 days.
So that's not a blanket statement. Okay.
Yeah. Difference of 3 days or not. That's what the Gemara says. There's the Rama over here. V'chein b'safina, she'yistarach ha'yisrael la'avol lidim alacha b'Shabbos. Similarly, a boat that the Jew is going to need to come to work on Shabbos. Also, li'kanes ba shloisha yamim koydem Shabbos. If you have a boat and the Jew is going to need to come to do work on Shabbos, you're not allowed to enter in there 3 days before Shabbos. Even if it's fresh water and it's above 10 tefachim, if you know the Jew is going to need to do prohibited acts on Shabbos, he's not allowed to do malacha, then says the Rivash, quoted by the Rama, that's an issue. There's no prohibition if the animals are pulling the boat on the seashore, and this is incomparable to going on a wagon, which would be prohibited. Seems like back then they would have land animals pulling boats. We never seen such a thing in our day and age. Mishna Berura gives a nice introduction over here. Before we enter into explain the words of the Shulchan Aruch, Natik Lashon HaBraisa, Nemar Batzeh B'Gemara Daf Yates. This is a Mishna Berura. I'm going to quote what the Braisa says in the Gemara in Shabbos and Daf Yates, which we learned last session. You're not allowed to go on a ship in 3 days of Shabbos. What is it talking about? It's if it's optional. If it's for a mitzvah, it's permissible. This is the Gemara. You have to stipulate with the captain who isn't Jewish. They should stop the ship on Shabbos, but he doesn't need to. That's according to Rabbi. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, you don't even need to make that stipulation with him. From Surah to Sidon, which is a journey of 1 day, even on Erev Shabbos, would be permissible to go on the ship. That's the Gemara. There are many reasons that are provided in the poskim for this prohibition of going on a ship for Shabbos, on Shabbos. Number one, keep track over here. Hatam Shema yitzarech a Yisrael lasos malacha ba'atmo b'Shabbos. Mishum pikuach nefesh. The Jew might need to do malacha on Shabbos, prohibited act which he's not allowed to do on Shabbos, because of pikuach nefesh. The makom sakanahu, because it is a dangerous place. So saving a life, of course, pikuach nefesh is doicha kol tarakulin is doicha Shabbos. To save someone's life pushes off Shabbos in the whole Torah. But you shouldn't bring yourself in an environment where you know that if you're going to go in that environment, so that will cause,
So the environment causes you to come to call Hashem just to save yourself.
yeah, exactly, save someone else. Oh, sheyasa ha'ina Yehudi balasvina avudo melacha b'kshira sakela ushara chilulim. The guy also, fellow isn't Jewish, the Ina Yehudi, the captain, he might do work on behalf of you regarding the tying of the sail and other forms of desecrating Shabbos. Or it's a problem of tchum, which the Beis Yosef discusses at length. Over the last few days, I actually went through the Beis Yosef. I made the decision that the Chafetz Chaim sums it up just so organized and nicely. There's no reason to go through the Beis Yosef over here. So those are three reasons. Number one, you need to violate Shabbos. Number two, the other guy's going to be violating Shabbos for you. Number three, tchumim. Sure, Tzion goes into this a little bit more. Sure, Tzion goes into this a little bit more over here. Right, so these are three reasons. We're going to go now to reason number four. The Rif holds, which we saw inside last time. The Rif holds that if the problem over here is a concern that you might come to do work that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos or Tchumim, it's a problem of Eruv. Sure, it would be prohibited even before 3 days. Why are we differentiating between 3 days within Shabbos or not? The Gama Devar Mitzvah Lo Hayamutter also for a mitzvah wouldn't be permissible. El de Ikar HaIser Mishum Bittul Mitzvahs Einik Shabbos. Rather, the main prohibition is because a person is nullifying the mitzvah of Onik Shabbos. The Kol Shlosh Yamim HaRishonim Yesh Lahem Sar Machmas Na'anue HaSafina. Because the 3 days, the first 3 days, there's pain because of the movements of the ship. When a person goes on a boat, he's going to be in pain in the first 3 days. Shagufo Mishaber. His body breaks. This is what it means to get seasick. Kidechsev Yachoigu v'yanuu kashikor. Guy's moving like a drunk person. He's moving all over the place. Also, you have the smell that comes from the salty water. So over here you see a difference: salt water versus fresh water. The ein rucho chazeres lavo aracher shloisha yamim shahur gol bazeh k'mo shekosov siv beis. and his spirit doesn't return to come until after 3 days that he's used to it. In other words, kolos chalos kashos. It says in the Mechelta, Rashi quotes it on Chumash, all beginnings are difficult. And when you first begin going on a ship, you're going to get seasick. That will detract from one's owning Shabbos. He's not going to be able to eat them properly on Shabbos. That's reason 4 of the Rif. You're going to have to see nowadays, are ships built differently? And there's less of a reason of this concern of getting seasick. Hold that question for later, because we're just starting over here at these halachas. V'yisharimim dehatam sha'asru lahaflik b'safina hu mibnei shenira ki'ilu saf v'shad al pnei hamayim b'Shabbos. Reason 5, some say that the reason that it's prohibited to go on a ship, a boat, is because it looks like you are floating or swimming on the water. That is prohibited according to everyone because it's a decree that you might come to build a raft. It says later on over there, why before 3 days is it going to be permissible? By going on the ship a lot of time before, there's going to be a recognition. And you won't come to make the raft. I feel like that could be questioned, but all right, that's what it says. Those are 5 reasons why it's prohibited to go on a ship within 3 days of Shabbos for an optional activity. A ship, a boat, whatever it is. The reason why I say ship is because I'm not a big expert in boating, but the smaller boats that are only 15, 20 feet, you can't, it's not going to have enough energy to continue going the entire Shabbos. The bigger ones, though, they have enough ability to travel for days and days straight. So you have to make sure it's big enough that you could actually stay in there the whole time. You're not just gonna park in the middle of the sea. You're gonna, it's gonna keep going. Right? So those are 5 reasons for the difference. Shloisha yamim lekoidim shloisha yamim hu mishum de shloisha yamim koidim haShabbos mikri kami Shabbos v'chal lovely zar shel lovely dichul Shabbos mashinkin aval koidim shloisha yamim deim mikri basar Shabbos over dayin lo chal lo basar Shabbos haba shori lahaflik behem azavim yitzar chachach lovely dichul Shabbos shum koch nefesh. So it's easily understandable according to the Rif why he differentiates between within 3 days and not, because you're getting used to it, you're not going to get seasick. What about according to those other reasons? You might come to do malacha, there's a problem of Erev.
But the Rif was the Tchum, no?
No,
Who was the Tchum?
Rif rejected that.
I know, but who?
The Tchum, I mean, it was brought by a few poskim we saw already. The Rabbeinu Chanana was discussing it. And
Hanana was the one? Okay.
yeah, that's what we saw in the Gemara last time.
Okay.
I mean,
So it wasn't
over here, if you look over here. This is the act. Oh, Isser Tchumim, like it's explained in the base Yosef. He didn't quote who. I mean, we saw it in the Rabbeinu Chananel. I'm not gonna remember Shem Poskim. He doesn't quote who. We saw this in the Rabbeinu Chananel. The Rif even brought this up, but he rejected it. This is the Rif.
Okay.
He says it's because of that. There's no difference 3 days or not. The Rif
He's the one who
rejected
rejected it. Okay, fine.
So now comes along over here, and he's trying to bring it back. He's trying to say, no. If you're going to hold that the reason for this prohibition is because you might come to do work on Shabbos, you have an Isser Malacha issue, or you have an issue of Tchumen, so you have a difference of 3 days because 3 days is called 3 days within Shabbos is already connected to the upcoming Shabbos. 3 days before Shabbos is part of the previous Shabbos, like we learned by Hilchos Havdalah. You do Havdalah up until Tuesday. So Therefore, even if you do need to do work and be machal on Shabbos, it would be fine if you didn't go within 3 days, which also is a chiddush. There's a lot of interesting ideas over here being thrown out. That's basically what he says over here. Even though the Shulchan Aruch, as we already read, is going to hold like the Rif Shehetik Perusho, because the Shulchan Aruch only basically copies what the Rif said.
Mhm.
He doesn't bring anyone else over here. Mikol makom gam hus your like poiskim the koidim shlosh yamim shari afa makom shistach chachlav olidi chilu shabbos alidi malacha. Nevertheless, he's also going to hold like those poskim who say that before 3 days permissible, even in a place when you're going to need afterwards to come to chilu Shabbos through malacha. So the idea is like this: even if you're going to come to do malacha, it would be fine if it's not within 3 days. Moshe Kosev Sivdal and Vayim Mashiach Chazav Nusham, like it says in Sivdal. Look over there what we wrote. El Desfirle the Af Lo Hayabo Shum Chashash Malachut. Even if there's no problem of doing work or an era problem, could go and Shikula Shalanim Yehudim Tishanasa Bamalacha Mistama Daisidin Yehudi Nasa. All people who aren't Jewish running the ship over there, and it's if they do any work, it's with their own intention in mind. וגם היא במקום שעמק יויסם מעשר טווחים ממזים משום מסותחום להרבה פוסקים כדלקיימה and סימן טוב דלת עין שם. And also, it's in a place that is deeper than 10 tvachim. So there's no problem of Erev or Tchum according to any poskim. Even so, also mishum bitul oneg Shabbos l'chol. So just that reason of now you're not going to have oneg Shabbos because you're going to get seasick, it's going to be a problem over there.
That's within the 3 days.
Yeah. We explain the Shulchan Aruch. Feel Erev Shabbos, even Erev Shabbos. He said you could go for Dvar Mitzvah. Very good. If you're going for mitzvah, even on Erev Shabbos. I know. After Bavade lo Yakayim Oinik Shabbos, Ali Dezek, Moshe Kosim Mechaber, so basically Filu Hachimut or Kevin L'Sorach Mitzvah, V'Kaim Landa Isaac Mitzvah, Patam in a Mitzvah. Even though you're certainly not going to fulfill Onig Shabbos properly when you're going Erev Shabbos, because you might get seasick, it's still permissible. Because you're doing it for a mitzvah. And we hold if you're involved with one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. The Rif himself said this explicitly. This idea was not quoted in the introduction over here in the Hagdama, but we saw this last session in the Rif that for a mitzvah you're allowed to go even Erev Shabbos because once you're involved with one mitzvah, you're exempt from other mitzvah, aka from Oneg Shabbos. Lo mi bayimus, you know, halachas b'makom shemayim mukim yoyis me'asar tefachim the mutter vein lachol shlitziyas chos l'chum et chayim elanin chum l'mala me'asar tefachim. Goes without saying, if the ship is going in an area where the water is deeper than 10 tefachim, around 3 feet, it's permissible. You don't need to worry about Erev over there because we hold there's no problem with Erev above 10 tefachim. Rather, even in places where the water is less than 10 tefachim, it's also permissible to go on Erev Shabbos on the ship, since it's for a mitzvah purpose. You got to stipulate with the guy, Kosam, Maganavam de B'Shabbos, also lahaflik, Filu Davar Mitzvah Shabbos, you're not allowed to go, even if it's for a mitzvah. Because we're not able to stipulate with him. Even though some say you could go on Shabbos itself, this is talking about. Not so simple. Look at the Shari Tshuva, end of the Siman Chayadu. Yeah.
So how's he passing you?
It's clear he doesn't want you leaving on Shabbos itself.
Okay.
Got to tell him to stop. Whether you're going on Shabbos itself, on Erev Shabbos, or beforehand. Since you're within 3 days to Shabbos. Got to stipulate with the guy. But say for all Shabbos and stapik, let's say you can't stipulate, you're going. Let's say you can't tell him over here.
Okay. Because you're out of the base, not listening.
Yeah. You can't stipulate. He says, I'm not going to stop. Imakav v'lo. So does that hold you back or not? Could you go or not? You could still go. It's just for a mitzvah, but it won't hold you back. It's not ma'akiv. Oh, before I was looking at the wrong letter system. Okay, these aleph, my bad. These aleph are going over there. So over here, when we said, sorry about that. Some say the reason is reason one. You're gonna have to do malacha. Who's that from? That's the shita of the Raza. Reason two is someone might do work for you who isn't Jewish. That was the Ramban. Reason three, Rabbeinu Chananel, exactly like I said. Erif, Tchum, Rabbeinu Chananel. Reason four, the Rif. And lastly, reason five, with the swimming, that we already saw in Taisus. Halachos Mishlosh Yamim. In 3 days, the Hainu B'Yom Revi B'Shabbos Aser. From Wednesday during the week is prohibited. But the Vilna Gaon writes that the 3 days are calculated with Shabbos itself. Ubiyom Revi Mutter. On Tuesday would in fact be Ubiyom Revi, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. On Wednesday itself would be permissible. Is proof from the Tosefta and the Yerushalmi this idea. Kodem Shabbos, Vuhadin Kodem Yom Tov. The same halacha over here applies before Yom Tov. The Yom Tov Shabbos Shavin Bachin Yom Tov Sheni Ein Mafligin. So these halachas don't just apply to Shabbos; it also applies to Yom Tov and also the second day of Yom Tov as well. Filu b'Safina Vav. The Rama said, however, before 3 days is permissible, even with the ship that is being pulled through by animals. Which a loimer meaning the loinim the damilah halicha bakarim da also liyosel b'Shabbos afilim yashir ba'akarim kodim shalish yamim. Don't say this is similar to going on a wagon, which is prohibited to travel with on Shabbos, even if you sat in the wagon before 3 days. Look at the Rama, according to what we're regular to do, that we pull the ships with animals in the river. Seems like I don't know what type of animals these were. Even within 3 days, it's permissible to go on. Just said before 3 days because of other ships. Even if it's not told 10, I would have thought that's what's coming to teach us that it's not true. The reason is because since we began before 3 days. Ches is going on even in a place where the Jew will have to do work. If you don't go within the first 3 days of Shabbos, it's still going to be permissible. The reason is because of what we wrote above in the introduction. 3 days before Shabbos, they get connected to the upcoming Shabbos. The person has to be careful that they're not going to come to desecrate Shabbos. When you leave during the time, it's as if you're making a condition that you're going to be desecrating Shabbos. But before this, it's applicable to the previous Shabbos. So since you start in a permissible way, you shouldn't refrain because of the next Shabbos. Because then if a danger happens, because then if a danger happens and you're going to need to violate Shabbos, because in order to save a life, it's not considered a desecration of Shabbos. Look later on, what we're going to write about on this topic. Large Mishnah Berura here. Tess. Afterwards, he's going to do work for you. Meaning, don't refrain because of this from sitting on a ship because it's before 3 days. Aval mikol makom kol ma sheyachol laso shelo yisarich b'atzmo l'chal Shabbos, but anything you're able to do so that you won't need to desecrate Shabbos could go al yudei in a Yehudi v'kedonim pitzim l'chuy lasos came, for example, through someone who isn't Jewish. It is obvious that you would need to do this. If you're going in a small way, small distance, only 1 day walk in between the two, for example, Surah to Sidon, permissible to go on the ship even in the morning. If it's gonna continue and get dragged out an hour or two on the day, it's prohibited. You're not gonna reach there before Shabbos. That's why you gotta go in the morning. Make sure you have enough time. There's a good wind, you'll make the trip on 1 day. That's why you could go on Erev Shabbos. Possibly you could have a good wind. Nowadays, obviously, most of our ships do not. I mean, wind is certainly a factor, but we have powerful engines, much more powerful than they used to have.
But most people aren't traveling
By boat.
by boat for, I guess, for the bar mitzvah or rishus.
That's right. Cruise ships.
It's usually just
Cruise ships. Usually, I think the cruise ship average trip is 5 days. So you do have ones that are purposely on the weekend. Those are times of, I mean, from the flights, flights are significantly cheaper Tuesday to Thursday anywhere because less people are traveling. More people are traveling on the weekends. So these cruise ships, they go on the weekends. So that's when this would become very applicable. Assuming that you get out of the issue of the cruise ships that people are modestly dressed. Because these cruise ships, especially in warm environments, it's not a place where a firm Jew should be. Okay. Mishna Berura, Yud Beis. Bin Tzarech Lishvos Yimosh Yisvos L'Inyan L'Hafik B'Shabbos Ayin Sifya Gimel. So this is talking about over here, if you're going within on a river where you don't need to worry about getting seasick or the salt bothering you. You could even go on Erev Shabbos and you don't need to stipulate with the captain to stop on Shabbos. That's assuming you don't know that it's less than 10 tvachim. The kevin the tchumim the rabbanon of atfilu tchumim the yud beis mil kaimalan the yamim unaharos im behem iser daraisa ledivri hakol shein doimim ledigli midbar lefikach talinan besfeiko lahakel ve'amrinan doimok asara tvachim lekarkas v'ina lekarka ma'im ve'in tchum l'malama asara. Since the tchum, the area of is rabbinic, even if it would be 12 mil, we hold that when it comes to rivers and lakes, there's no problem from the Torah midaraisa, according to everyone, because you can't compare it to the flags in the desert. Therefore, we're going to assume that a doubt we could be lenient on, and we're going to say that the depth of 10 tfachim from the ground of the ship to the ground of the water is 10 tfachim, and there's no problem of a tchum. Even though the water is 10 tvachim deep, nevertheless, if the ship is submerged in the water, the bigger the ship, the deeper the ship goes under the water. You don't have a distance of 10 tvachim, 3 feet, between the floor of the ship, which is submerged in the water, and the actual floor of the body of water. It goes without saying if you're sitting on the basement part of the ship, so now you're less than 10 tvachim. Even if you're on the deck of the ship, you're on a higher area. So you yourself, where you're situated on the ship, you're higher than 10 tvachim. Nevertheless, there's still going to be an issue. Since the ship has a width of 4, and it's good to go over there like you're standing down below. So it's as if you are standing down below. Some permit this when you are sitting above 10 tvachim and you are not regular. Your legs are not suspended down below, lower than 10 tvachim, and you could rely on this and those words when you need it. Also, latzis. Shulchan Aruch says, in a place where you do know that it's less than 10 tvachim, that's going to be a problem. I know B'kol Shlosha Yom Kodem Shabbos is within 3 days of Shabbos. Im Yedua Sheyizdamein Lo Sham B'Shabbos Mokim Hahu V'Yitzarich La'avor Alav Al Isur Tchumim. If you know that it will occur to you over there on Shabbos, that place, and you're going to need to pass it over the prohibition of the Tchum. But before 3 days is fine. Kimo Shekasu B'Sif Alpaga, like it says over there. No, this doesn't mean pass, this means transgress. This means within 3 days before Shabbos, if you know that's going to happen on Shabbos, and you need to transgress this or tchum, it's going to be a problem, but before 3 days is fine. Rama said, similarly, a ship, where the Jew is going to need to do a malacha, an act, you can't go 3 days before Shabbos. Afilu malacha derabanan, even if the malacha is rabbinic. Likanis b'shalosh yamim, to go 3 days. Hatam, the reason is k'mosh k'sav l'mal over there. There's no prohibition if the animals are pulling it. Roitza loner. Dim lo haya isar acher, if there's no other prohibition. Kilom haros hanoivim. For example, the rivers that are flowing, l'mal masara, and it's above 10, so it's fresh water, it's above 10. Gam lo yishar ch'shalas malacha sham, the Jew doesn't need to do malacha over there. Ein la eser. The Yisa, there's no problem of traveling. The Safina, Heichish behemoths Moshe Safino Siadaim Kilu Yoish Bekarva behemoths Moshe Saiso de Aser. Law Amin and Hachi. There's no prohibition over there to travel on the ship that the animals are pulling. And it's as if say that it's as if you're sitting in a wagon which is getting pulled by animals, which would be prohibited. We don't say that. Time over there, the reason is over there, if you're riding on a horse and buggy, so you might come to take off a branch from the tree, and then you're going to smack the horse and to guide it. But over here, the animals are very far from you, and therefore it will be permissible even within 3 days of Shabbos.
I'm in place here. This place.
Okay. All right, so we're going to pick it up Mitzvah Hashem next time. Next time. Yeah. I'll let everyone know.
All right, for Shlomo, we feel better.
Yes, appreciate it. Ready,
Wait, what is this? What are we talking about? It's